Just making sure I'm recording because I accidentally opened Adobe. It's a mess.
One, two, three.
What's up, bitches? Nope. That is, you're not the bitches. I'm the bitch. That's fuck. It's been a while. Uh, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Cocktails. I'm your bitch, Christy Oxborrow, and with me, as always, the Kim to my Kardashian, the hot dog to my mustard? Wait, what did I? I don't know. She's the greatest person alive, Miss Lauren Ash. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I spent some time in the sun. Yeah,
She's got a scotch of the sunstroke, just a touch.
yeah. I do think we're under like heat warnings. We just thought this afternoon I'd sit outside in the shade, nice breeze, working on my notes.
Yeah.
Um, and then I came in the house hours later and went, I think I have heat stroke because I was not prepared, and I'm like incredibly warm all the time, and mentally I'm not here. I mean, I called everyone bitches. Um, it's fine. It's it's fine. It is what it is.
Look, you know what? You got to cross the line to know where it is.
You're right.
The heat is one it's a pretty specific line.
Yeah.
But is it? You know, like sometimes it can sneak up on you.
Yeah. I mean, I had a drink out there with me. Um, but I didn't consume it like a fool.
Sure.
And I should have known it was a mistake being being out there in the fresh air. Um, when
That's what you get.
I heard a very large vehicle pull up in front of my home. I checked the doorbell camera we have, and I see it's Purelator. And I was like, I should go meet him in case it's something I had to sign for. I did have to sign for it. So thank God, because otherwise I would have had to go in 2 days to a place to pick it up, and that would have been a nightmare. But I ended up like coming up behind him, and I was like, "Hey, I'm actually outside today." And he went, "God, why?" And I just went, "I don't know. I I don't have an answer." But I kept getting distracted looking at the birds. And then we tried to set up a makeshift bird bath because there was a little tiny bird. I'm not even going to get into claiming I knew what it was. Let's call it a sparrow. I
It probably was. They're quite
nine times
common.
9 times out of 10, it's a sparrow, right?
It is.
Just some little brown thing, but not a chickadee. I know that much, but it was some sort of sparrow. But it landed kind of on our pavement in the backyard, and its mouth was open, and I swear to God, it was panting, and I was like, I think it's hot. I'm like, do birds pant? I don't know. So long story short, I was concerned vocally for long enough that my husband used like a bucket and some tubs and made a makeshift bird bath that we placed in the yard just in the hopes that one of them would stop in for a sprinkle. And if you think I didn't stare at that fucking thing for hours waiting for it, and then I just turned to my husband and went, I get old people now. I was like, I get
Yeah.
just sitting there
You know
watching the birds.
what I earnestly thought at one point today?
Yeah.
Because I don't need to tell you. Look, we've also obviously I've researched this week. What a delight. It's been
Yeah.
a minute. And there's been a few times that I've like typed something and I've missed a word or I've flipped something and I'm going, God, am I in cognitive decline? Like, is this what it is? And then I thought, earnestly, I thought to myself, well, every time I do a crossword, I feel alive. Like I feel like my brain is going so quickly and I can access knowledge so quickly. I need to be doing more crosswords every day. Then I remembered that I said that years ago, bought a crossword book and then
Yeah.
forgot to ever do them. So anyway, to follow up, yeah, and I also get the elderly just desperately trying to hold on to the memories that they have by
Right.
doing as many crosswords a day as they can fit in.
Yeah, look, I recall with great detail you talking about crosswords. I believe
Yep.
you even ordered it in the moment while we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I think I
I
should be
did
doing
one.
more like brain puzzles.
I subscribed to this is not a shout out, but I subscribed to the New York Times. They have a brain games every day.
Oh,
And I was on a streak for many months where I would do them every single day. And then I just
hey,
here's what's interesting. They say it takes 2 weeks to build a habit. And I've done that. But what I'll
yeah,
say is it takes one day to lose it. Like I again, like it was like all of the
yep,
months I put into this, I missed one day, gone. I haven't done them since.
yep. Oh, 100%. I
Yeah.
don't know what that is,
Yeah.
but I just, I'm not saying it should take as much time to get out of the habit, but it should take more than a single missed time because constantly I'll come up with a plan and be like, I'm going to do this every day. And then I get so far into it, miss a single day. And then I'm like, it was good while it lasted.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know what that is.
it feels like, in like a lion, out like a lamb. Like it feels like it's like you got to really work to build that habit, but man, you
Yeah.
don't got to work hard to lose it. I guess
Yeah.
the only thing would be any sort of like substance issues, right? Like I guess those are things where it's like, but I feel like with substance issues, it can take hold of people very quickly. So then what, I guess that's the flip where it's like
That's
it can
the,
grab you quick and then it's very difficult to get out of. I guess. I don't know. I don't know.
I like that this took a turn from crosswords to meth.
I
It felt like it went one
so
way.
quick.
Yeah.
So quick. I mean, I also want you to know that I uttered the following phrase to my boyfriend again in
Mm.
all seriousness today. I said, I will not survive the day if there is not French fries. That was something I said at one point.
Now, if I may ask,
Yeah.
did you mean like if you don't have French fries today, you won't
Mm-hmm.
survive, or if you
Mm-hmm.
won't survive any day that does not include French fries?
No, I know I can make it through a day without fries. I was saying today specifically was
Yeah.
testing me. And I was like, I will not survive if this day doesn't have fries.
I think that's one of the most beautifully honest things I've ever heard. And that's how I live my life.
Yeah.
I haven't had fries today and I'm upset about it.
Yeah. I'm mad. I'm mad. I'm mad. Listen, and I know what you're thinking. Like, what happened, Lauren? How did this day test you? It's first of all, just lady troubles. First of all,
Ah,
um,
yeah.
uh, menstruation. There. Why am I dancing around it?
Wow.
Why am I dancing
Look at
around it?
you. I was trying to think of the word. God, this is why you do crosswords because I'm losing fucking words. Revolutionary. That's what
Thank
you are.
you. Thank you
Revolution.
very much.
Yeah.
And then everything else I think was honestly just a offshoot of that. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
one of those things where it was like, I'm crying and I don't know why. Like one of those days. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's what the kicker is for me, is that it starts like preteen-ish and just for the rest of your life. And I'm not specifically meaning just that portion, but like something related to it just
Right.
is in your life for the rest of your life. I've
Yeah.
hit the beautiful moment in my life where I will like move a very small amount and my body is like, oh shit, I think she's moving. Fuck, she's going to be so hot. Make her sweat so hard that it looks like she's been doing a workout for 8 hours. And I'll it's just, and it's streaming down. And my husband looked at me the other day and just went, what's happening? And I went, oh, this is 40. And then walked away. So I'm
We have
pleasant to live with.
did we talk about this on the show? We probably have. Again, my memory can't be trusted. About how menopause did we talk about this?
I don't know. It's possible. But again,
Well,
my
forgive
memory
us
isn't great.
listeners if we've already been down this well-trodden road. Your two aunties here are starting to lose their memory, so they can't remember what they have or haven't talked about.
Yeah.
Um, I was reading something a friend shared with me that menopause is the day that is 1 year after your last period. That's when menopause starts. And that's technically where the symptoms that we say are associated with menopause kind of end. So the fallacy is that when you hit menopause, the hot flashes, all these different things, right? That's perimenopause. That's the like 5 to 10 years pre-menopause.
I need to know. Are any of the ladies out there in menopause, like living their best life? Are they like, there's no more hot flashes? I'm not, my boobs aren't sore. Everything's fine. There's not cramping. Like, are you living your best life?
These are
Are
the
you in your yard
stories.
watching birds?
The doing a crossword.
Oh my God, that's what I needed. And
Yeah.
water. I foolishly
I
didn't take
think
water.
I think that people do experience that. That when it's like you're finally to the other side, then it's like it's a whole new world.
See that. Get
Yeah.
me there and then let me have decades of that.
That feels more just. But to your
Yes,
point, that's not the hand that we get dealt.
it's not.
No.
It's really not. It's like I was trying to explain it because I, of course, live in a house of men. Um, and just trying to explain it where it's like, it's not just like the week that things are happening. You get symptoms the week before, letting you
Yep.
know, oh, that's coming. You get the week of, which is hell. And then you get the week after, which is just little things trailing off, being like, that happened, it's over. And you get a week where
Yeah.
you're usually okay.
We're looking at 7 to 10 days a month max.
Yep. Yep.
Max.
Oh, it's a nightmare. It's a
Yeah.
full nightmare. And just
Yeah.
this whole new thing of just be feeling like I'm on the surface of the sun almost at all times.
Yeah.
That I don't need.
You
But
don't.
I am looking forward to the day of it's all over. I'm free. I'm going to become the kookiest old woman.
Yeah.
And I can't wait.
Yeah.
I'm going to start painting.
Good
Oh
for
my
you.
fucking God. I'm going to paint birds in my backyard. This is how it's. I
I
talked about
love this for
planting
you.
flowers earlier. I've never been like a gardener. I just don't understand plants. I can create and keep humans alive, but a plant, I cannot. They bring home every year around Mother's Day, they bring home like a tiny little pot of dirt. And it supposedly has a seed in it, but I've never managed to get it anywhere.
Yeah.
This year, I got that sucker. It was growing, like it was outgrowing the little pot that came home. So I was like, shit, I got to go buy a bigger pot. So I bought a bigger pot. I bought the potting soil. I got this thing ready. I got that bitch to over 2 feet now. We're like,
Wow.
it's really grown. I've taken a real pride in it. I talk to it every time I walk past it. I get teased by my family for that because they're like, why do you talk to it? And I'm like, because I want it. I need it to hear positive things so it can grow. It's doing well. So I've already talked about like, well, maybe next year I'll consider a couple of flowers for the yard. And then it turned into, well, there is a section of the yard where I might rip out some of the landscaping and make that a flower bed. A flower bed. I don't know the first fucking thing. I don't want to weed. There are so many things that could go wrong and I'll get frustrated, but I'm just like, I should think about it. Like, this is where I'm at. Flowers and birds are now like, I'm at that stage of perimenopause, apparently, whatever stage that is.
The flower and bird stage. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's no
Yeah.
longer the birds and the bees, it's the birds and the flowers.
And I'm at the crying for fries stage, the fry cry stage.
The fry cry stage. Well, I've been in that one since the womb.
Yeah. Well,
I
same.
apparently used to love raw potatoes as
Is
like an
that
infant.
okay to eat?
I hope so. Apparently, my mother ate them when she was pregnant with me, and I'm convinced that's why I have such a love of potatoes.
I
Because
still know
I'm
that we're
convinced whatever
supposed to.
you craved and ate the most, your kid's gonna somehow like that someday.
Well, shout out Mother Laurel. She
Yeah.
does talk about being very into, she was into chocolate covered coconut fingers, kind of like a
Oh
Bounty
God.
bar.
Yep.
Yep. She was
Hmm.
eating a lot of those when she was pregnant with me. And here's the thing, I do love coconut. That is 100% true. Yeah.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, when I was a baby, I apparently used to like crawl over to the garden in the backyard, pull out a green onion, and just suck on it. What is that? Was anyone watching
How long had you been in the sun?
me? Great question. Great
Just a
question.
little red baby trying to get any moisture from that green onion out of the ground.
I had
She
not
was
even
thirsty.
considered the moisture. You're right. My God, was I just
I
looking for a drink?
you might you might have been. I
I
think your like
also
most cave baby tendencies took over in that moment where it was like you
my
dig for
fight or
water.
flight. And I was like, find water. My brain went survival instinct. First thing you do is find water.
Yeah.
But yet today, I'm out in the heat and I'm like, I'm in the shade. It's fine. Rookie mistake. Get a
Yeah,
fucking water.
shade is the silent killer. I'll be honest with you. And I'm not just talking about throwing shade. I'm also
Thank
talking
you.
about sitting in shade. It can
Yeah.
take you out. You can still get, yeah, even if I'm in the shade, I can with sunscreen, hat, and water, I sometimes can still get a little
Oh, I
feeling.
was out there, no hat,
Oh,
no sunscreen,
Christy Lynn.
shorts, barely dressed. I was in shorts and a t-shirt. For the love of God, I wasn't barely dressed. You're allowed to show your knees. Decade am I from? I don't even know anymore. Again, I've had some sun today
Mm-hmm.
and I'm feeling a little crazy.
I think this is a great time for you to drive the bus. Again, it's been so long since we've done this. Again, I've been so busy with so many things. And listen, we know that we told you it was going to be a different episode this week, but then
Yeah.
we decided to both research in a week and slot this one in there. So what if I hope that this is a little decadent surprise?
Oh, I like that. See, this is why you're the best at driving the bus because you not only get like different tones, you also, I mean, don't call them bitches. Um, but then like you do things like the little shoulder shake, which I couldn't love more. Um, and those are just things that I don't do. But yeah, I hope that this is a fun surprise. I
Yeah,
don't know if anybody's coming into today going, but that's not the episode it's going to be. Don't worry, that episode's coming.
it's coming.
But
It's
look,
coming.
sometimes in the world of, I won't even just say podcasting, in the world of working,
Yeah.
you look at your schedule and go, oh, son of a bitch,
Yep.
I have a thing. How do I make this other thing happen? And you
Yep.
just figure it out.
You figure it out.
Yeah. This was us troubleshooting. There it is. I knew there was a word
Yep.
that started with trouble, but I couldn't remember the last half of it. Crosswords, daily
Yep.
crosswords, daily sunscreen, or simply just don't go in the sun, you know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm cuckoo bananas, more so than usual. So who knows what this ride is going to be? But I couldn't be happier to drive. I shouldn't be legally driving, so this is the only way I should be driving in this moment. But speaking of things you should do out in the sun, what you drinking over there?
I have a Kirkland signature lime sparkling water.
Hmm.
And I've been using this Stanley. Don't come for me because I got it for free from the Kelly Clarkson show the last time I was there. And let
Oh,
me tell you something.
beautiful.
I get what the hype is about now.
Does it keep it cold?
Freezing. I can put ice in here with water overnight. I wake up still freezing cold. It does the trick.
Oh,
There's a
well,
weight to this though. Like I think these could be considered weapons. Anyway, so yeah, I've just got two kinds of water going because again, if you are an OG listener of the podcast, you'll know that if I try to drink and then I try to read, my mouth does not cooperate and it's
sure,
not fun. Like it's not like, oh,
sure.
that's cute. It's just that I sound blah, 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 blah. Like it's not good.
I
That
respect
was
that.
me trying to speak through my own saliva.
Hey, look, I respect what you're going to do. I
Thanks.
love listening to you regardless as to how
Yes.
much you've consumed. I've just got a water and I'm doing a Pepsi slush. I'm not calling it a Slurpee because it didn't come from there. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
But again, I shouldn't have alcohol. I'm like in a place where I
Not
don't even
today.
know what's happening. Um, Maybe another day. Point is, so I know nothing about today. And I'm
Yeah.
very excited about this
Yes.
because this was something that you were like, hey, I might do something. And I went,
Right.
okay. And then like 2 days later, you were like, I have this many pages. This is what I've chosen. And I was
Yes.
like, great. And
Yeah,
this is just how it works.
it
But the
is.
beautiful thing is you've written a synopsis for
I
me
have.
that I can share with the dear people. See, I was nice there. I didn't mean bitches in a negative way. I've got to let it
No,
go. Um, anyhow, so today's episode, we are talking about Charles Cullen, the killer nurse,
the killer nurse. Yeah.
as opposed to whatever that Cullen, who was the Cullen on Twilight that was a doctor?
Oh, sure.
I should have looked him up. It's not worth talking about Twilight in this moment. I haven't watched it in years. Not the point. The point is so Charles Cullen always wanted to be a nurse because he said he always wanted to help people. His coworkers described him as the best teammate and an excellent nurse. Little did they know, while they were having a great time working with him, Charles was actually killing their patients. Charles Cullen would eventually admit to the murder of 29 patients and attempted murder of 6 more. However, experts believe he may have actually killed as many as 400 people, which would make him the most prolific serial killer in American history. So, what drove Charles Cullen to kill? How did he manage to pull off these murders in medical facilities without getting caught? And maybe the real question is, how did multiple medical facilities get alerted to his suspicious behavior but did nothing? Lauren Ash investigates. It's written down. I literally almost called you Lauren Oxborough. Just know that.
If Christy
That's
is still with us by the end of this, it's going to be a miracle. We may need to
yeah.
get you into a cold shower on the break. That's all I'm going to say.
yeah. Yeah, I don't hate the idea, but I did write down already that I was going to tell you. I really love that you called us everybody's aunties.
Yeah,
I like the idea of us just being aunties, aunties, either way. I like us.
100%.
I just like the idea that we're just the dear people's aunties.
I think it makes
That feels
sense. I
right.
think we've both gotten to that place in our lives. Even
Oh,
a year ago, I
100%.
would have been like, I'm a fun sister. No, no, I've crossed over, and I'm cool with it.
And look, the day that I'm free of the female trap that we're stuck in for our lives,
Yeah,
the day that I'm free, I'm willing to be everybody's Nana.
and I will join you there.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Of course. So we are talking Charles Cullen, aka the killer nurse. I should mention just a quick trigger warning. There will be mentions of suicide and a brief mention of animal abuse. Don't worry, we don't get into any details, but trigger warning for those who may need it. So I watched the Netflix documentary Capturing the Killer Nurse, which tells the story of Charles Cullen and his murders. The documentary was based on the book The Good Nurse, a true story of medicine, madness, and murder, written by Charles Graeber, which was also turned into the movie The Good Nurse, starring Eddie Redmayne and Jessica Chastain. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to start by providing all of the information that's covered in the documentary, and then I'm going to tell you all the information that the documentary didn't include. And trust me, there is a lot they didn't mention. For example, the details of Cullen's childhood, the details of one of his prior arrests, and his wild courtroom behavior. So buckle in, dear listeners, because even if you watch the documentary, I promise you there is a lot you don't know about Charles Cullen. Unless you also went on a Google rabbit hole, in which case I salute you. I also don't know why I wrote a second synopsis, essentially, but I did. It's been a while since I've done this, folks.
Look,
Give us both a break.
look, I think you're doing great. Um, also, I could not love more that you were like, there's her synopsis. Great. So you want to hear how a pro does it?
No,
Here, this is where we're at. No,
I
this
felt like,
makes you had to talk about. I talked about the case that you're going to talk about, the
right.
specific bad guy, as it were.
Yes.
You just gave a quick synopsis on the documentary.
I felt like I needed to
So,
fill in how I was approaching it
yeah,
because it was just too much to try and mix the research with the documentary, if that makes sense. You'll see as we go. So I was like, I think I just need to let them know, don't worry. I'm going to cover the documentary and then I'll go back and I'll give you the rest of the information. Because I tried to slot it in and I was like, my head is spinning. It's just too confusing. It's too confusing. So anyway, it'll all make sense when we're done. I just wanted to let people know not to panic.
Sure. You know what you're doing.
I've been here once or twice. I wouldn't say I've ever known what I'm doing, though.
You're doing great.
All right. So our story is going to begin in March 2003, the beginning of the end of Charles Cullen's murder spree. Our story begins at Somerset Hospital in Somerville, New Jersey. Here, Cullen worked closely with two other nurses, Amy Lauren and Donna Hargreaves. Amy was a single mom of two daughters. She worked as a critical care nurse at Somerset from 2001 to 2004. She said she loved being an ICU nurse and felt like she was the protector of her patients. Donna Hargreaves worked there from 2000 to 2014. She is self-described as, quote, hyper, and added that one of the senior nurses had banned her from drinking coffee due to this trait she possessed. Donna said she loved working with Amy. The two women talked about how they always had to rely on each other and the other nurses. And Charlie Cullen, they referred to him as Charlie, was an excellent nurse. Amy said she loved working with him. He always made Amy laugh. And the three of them, she, Donna, and Charlie, worked together most of the time. They called themselves the Three Musketeers. During his time at Somerset, Cullen was once featured in a flyer promoting the hospital. His photo and a quote were included in the pamphlet. Amy said that everyone who saw that flyer therefore associated Somerset Medical Center with Charles Cullen. She also said Cullen was very proud that someone wanted to take his picture and ask his opinion. So what exactly did the pamphlet say? Obviously, I'm going to tell you. There was a little picture, and beside it, it said, Charles, RN, appreciates the technology and more. Then they included a quote of his, which was, quote, it has a great community feeling that offers the most advanced technologies. The computerized charting helps with consistency and accuracy. I was also attracted to the self-scheduling and changed to participate in policies and procedures. Now, I wanted to give you that information simply because it was there, but also put a pin in it because it will kind of come into play later. Amy said that Cullen had the air of a boy that was bullied and that she wanted to protect him. And she did protect him, sometimes even to a fault. But again, more on that later. Reverend Florian Gall called his sister Lucille at 2 a.m. one morning in early June 2003. He said he was having trouble breathing, and he was headed to the Somerset ER. Lucille said she would meet him there. When Reverend Gall arrived, he was immediately intubated. Turned out he was suffering from pneumonia and sepsis and consequently needed to be put on a ventilator. He was described by doctors as being, quote, gravely ill, and his sister Lucille was always at his bedside. Over the course of a couple of weeks at Somerset, Reverend Gall actually started to improve. He was stable. Doctors were cautiously optimistic about his recovery. And Amy remembers specifically that he was doing better as she had recalled that he was being moved from the ICU to the CCU, which of course is the critical care unit. One night, Lucille said she was going to go home for the night. Reverend Gall perked up to kind of say goodbye to her. And shortly after she left, he coded and died. Amy was shocked because he had been improving. Father Gall was 68 at the time of his death. He had served as the pastor of his Hunterdon County parish since 1984, where he formed a festival choir and supervised workshops for parishioners on such things as music, art, and the environment. He had endured different illnesses in his life, but was always described as a fighter who always bounced back. So his death seemed like a real mystery. How could he have died when he was improving? So next, the documentary just jumps into this recording of a female nurse from Somerset. They didn't indicate who it was, but she was calling the Poison Control Center in Newark, New Jersey. She spoke to Dr. Bruce Ruck, who is a toxicologist, and she asked about the drug digoxin. Digoxin is normally used to treat heart failure. Dr. Ruck said it would strengthen your heart's contractions and make it stronger. But as your heart would be contracting stronger and it's getting higher and higher, your heart rate will start to slow down because it's pumping more blood with each pump. And of course, if there's too much of it in your system, it's going to do that until you eventually die. The nurse informed Dr. Ruck that she had a patient who had not gotten a dose of digoxin in about 2 days, but his digoxin level was continuing to climb. Dr. Ruck said that didn't make sense. It was impossible. She continued on to say that this was on the 16th, but then on the 28th, they had another dig toxicity in the same unit. Dr. Ruck's tone completely changes at this point, saying, "Same unit?" She says yes. And he said, "It has to be a lab error. There's no way that this is possible." The nurse clarified that the man had died, so it seemed like maybe it wasn't a lab error. Dr. Ruck asked, "Was there anything else strange going on? Any patients with low blood sugars or hypoglycemia?" The nurse replied, "Off the record, there were 2 people in the hospital before this that went hypoglycemic really strangely, and we were starting to panic." Dr. Ruck responded simply, "I'm going to put it right in your hands. You know how a police matter." Basically saying, something's up. If you're having patients suddenly become hypoglycemic and die, you're having patients have this high level of this drug in their system and die, you got a police matter. So 2 days later, Dr. Ruck calls Somerset to follow up. He asks for Nancy. So I guess this nurse who he was speaking to was named Nancy, but they never named her in the documentary. I couldn't find anything about that. I love that I just had to conclude that for the sake of being thorough. Regardless, he stated that he was trying to follow up on the call that he had received and asked what the hospital had decided to do. The hospital worker on the phone said, "Actually, administration has taken over that investigation. They've called in our attorneys and they've asked me really not to talk to any outside agencies at this point." Dr. Ruck asks, "So you don't know if they've gone to the authorities yet?" And the worker responded, "I don't know that. No. And I've probably shared more than I should have right now," and hangs up. After that, Dr. Ruck said he never heard anything further. Cut to 3 months later. It's Friday, October 3rd. Detective Tim Braun, who was commander of the Somerset Major Crimes Unit from 2002 to 2005, gets a call from the Somerset County prosecutor about a death that occurred at Somerset Medical Center. His on-call detective at the time was Danny Baldwin, who was new in the office and new into the unit. Baldwin said he felt a bit of pressure being the new guy and wanted to do a very good job to show that he deserved to be there. Detective Braun says that they were ordered into a meeting with high-ranking members of the Somerset Medical Center. The administrators, along with their legal team, had been looking into the deaths of several patients. Mary Lund, a risk manager, was the point of contact with the hospital in regards to the case. Somerset did an internal investigation surrounding incidents where patients at the facility had abnormal lab findings. The first 2 were, of course, low glucose levels. The following 2 were, of course, elevated digoxin levels. Detective Baldwin requested that Mary Lund provide police with a copy of the internal investigation that they had conducted. So Detective Baldwin was expecting to receive a binder, but the next day got one sparse document written by an attorney saying they didn't uncover any suspicious activity. However, that same document did mention professional registered nurse Charles Cullen by name. So the detectives did a background check and 2 arrests came up for Cullen, a DUI in the 1980s and a criminal trespass charge. Now, the documentary says nothing else about that, doesn't get into it at all. But guess who did? Me, because that's what we do here.
Yeah.
So, in 1993, Cullen asked a nurse that he worked with by the name of Michelle Tomlinson out to dinner. Soon afterward, his behavior became erratic and obsessive towards her, and according to a police report, Tomlinson said Cullen called her repeatedly despite her requests for him to stop. He also followed her around at the hospital and attempted to give her an engagement ring. Then, in the early morning of March 23rd, 1993, Cullen broke into Tomlinson's home while she and her young son were asleep. He was subsequently arrested. He pled guilty to misdemeanor trespassing and received a year of probation. He also attempted suicide a few days after his arrest and told a police officer that he was fantasizing that Tomlinson was his girlfriend. Now, there's obviously a lot to unpack in what I just told you, but put a pin in that too, because I promise you, I will not let it get away from us. We will get back to it later in the show. But for now, I just wanted to point out that this feels like really important information that I guess the police didn't feel was important at the time, nor did the filmmaker who made this documentary. Personally, I think it speaks to Cullen's personality and his state of mind. But again, I digress. More on that later. So, Back to the Future. 2003. The internal investigation report was actually just a letter from a lawyer, as I stated. Detective Tim Braun said that attached to the back of the report was a stickum note. Now, did I have to pause the documentary to ask my boyfriend if he had ever heard someone else call a sticky note a stickum note? Yes, I did. Had he? No, he had not. Regardless, the note in question said, quote, Pennsylvania Trooper Bob Egan. Then it had a phone number, Then, quote, called for info investigating missing meds at St. Luke's Hospital. Interesting. So, this case and this document were regarding Somerset Medical Center. How does St. Luke's connect? So, it seems that the Pennsylvania State Police had requested the same information that Detective Braun was seeking about Charles Cullen. Detective Baldwin called Egan from the note, who worked again for the Pennsylvania State Police, and he confirmed he was indeed investigating Cullen. Now, Detective Braun is adamant at this point that without the Stickum note, this case would not have ever exploded the way it eventually did, which almost makes it feel like there should be a computer system database for when suspicious things happen regarding a specific person. Then another police officer in another state could type in a name and get that information immediately. But if you'd like to hear me rage about the misuse of a similar system that is already in place in Canada and could have saved lives, please give episode 38, Bruce MacArthur, a listen and get ready to hear me yell the word power case more than a few times. But once again, I digress.
I like that a lot. Also, that's the most non-Canadian you've ever sounded saying MacArthur.
I was really trying hard.
It paid off.
MacArthur.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
So, at this point, the police knew that Cullen was being suspected in deaths in more than one hospital. And if he was indeed involved in those deaths, at this point in time, he still had access to patients where he was currently working. So, at this point, the police know they're racing against the clock or more people are going to die. Police learned from Charles Cullen's family members that he was very smart and a loving father. These family members didn't know the scope of the investigation, but they weren't surprised that the police were there to talk about him. I'm sorry, what exactly does that mean? That's all they said in the documentary. And I was like, that's an odd thing to say and then never explain. But don't worry, I'll give some more context that I found out about that again later. But maybe it's because, oh, I don't know, he stalked a woman, broke into her home and lurked while her and her child slept. That could be a reason why his family wasn't surprised the police were looking into him.
Yeah.
Feels like that could have been worth including. You know, not to be a critic, but just saying. But again, the only information about Charles Cullen's past that the documentary provided was that he had allegedly poisoned a dog, and there was a recording of him speaking about himself about certain points of his life. He said, and this is a quote, "I never really liked being who I was. After my mother's death, I didn't cope with it very well. Mother was the only person at that time that sort of kept a cushion between what was happening in that house and me. With her gone, I just felt very unprotected. June of 1987, I graduated nursing school. It was the only thing I felt like I could do, and I felt like I was helping people." Then the documentary just moves on. So
It's
anyway,
like they were like, hey, we've created this documentary. And they were like, we're going to need a lot shorter.
it
And so they
feels
went,
like
we
there
have
was,
to make cuts.
yeah, it feels like there was some things left out. But again, definitely more on that later. So now we're into the investigation. We're on day 9. Detective Baldwin starts to put together a timeline of Cullen's career. It turns out that he had worked at 9 hospitals and 1 nursing home. They learned that there was an incident at Warren Hospital. The details were minimal, but they went to the prosecutor's office to learn more about the case. So, in September 1993, a woman named Helen Dean went into Warren Hospital for a procedure, and prior to being discharged, she was doing fine. They were going to be sending her to the Coventry Center for rehab before she could later go home. Her son Larry was there visiting, and a male nurse came in and asked for him to leave the room. The nurse pulled the curtain around Helen, and then Larry heard Helen holler, "Ouch." So he goes in, and the male nurse comes running out. Helen said, "He stuck me with a needle." Larry, who always carried a Swiss Army knife, pulled it out and using the magnifying glass, noticed that there was indeed a puncture mark on Helen's interior right thigh. Later that afternoon, Helen was being taken by ambulance to the rehab center, and Larry popped home to get her slippers. He got in the door to the house, the phone rang, and he was told his mother had died. Literally within 5 minutes of arrival at the rehab.
Oh my God.
Larry went to the prosecutor's office that night and reported that Helen had definitely been murdered, and he knew that it was the man in the room giving her that lethal injection. So they did do toxicology testing. They tested Helen for every single drug except digoxin. So the investigation was closed. They didn't find anything. There was a suspicion, but no evidence of a criminal case. Helen was 91 at the time of her death. Following that incident at Warren, Charles Cullen admitted himself to a psych facility. He said, quote, I wanted very much to quit being a nurse after Warren Hospital, but they were telling me that I was a deadbeat dad, that I had to continue to support the children. I knew that if I was placed in these situations that I would feel the need to end suffering. I didn't know how to say it, what was happening, what I was feeling, what I was doing. So it's unclear how long he stayed in that psych facility. I did see something in my research that indicated he was in psych facilities twice in 1993 for around 2 months each time, but I couldn't corroborate that information. That's the only thing I could find. Either way, after whatever amount of time it was that he spent there, it was determined that he was fit to go back to work, which is wild if he was telling them about the thoughts he was having. Maybe he wasn't telling them about those thoughts, but regardless, a document written to his employer stated of Cullen, quote, it is the consensus of his treatment team that there is no reason he could not resume his duties as a registered nurse at your hospital following his discharge. Signed, Tioman Cook, MD. Did I look into Dr. Cook? I did. I did find one case he was involved in, but there was nothing that was of note enough to bring it up. I wish I could have found more. So, in the documentary, Charles Graeber, who of course is the author of the Good Nurse book, pointed out that, quote, nurses are treated as interchangeable parts. Staffing agencies fill in, people come and go. Transient is somewhat expected. The institution of private for-profit healthcare, the business of healthcare, was one that Charlie Cullen was perfect for because you become invisible. He was, to many, the man without a face. Chilling. So, day 17 of the investigation. The idea that a nurse may be killing patients was obviously very disturbing, but the prosecutor wouldn't sign an arrest warrant based on hearsay. Amy said that she and Donna were noticing that their lab results were coming in completely skewed. So they thought that there was definitely something with the lab. Definitely something wrong with the lab at the hospital. And if they weren't sure about something in the moment, who did they go to? Charlie Cullen to ask him. Amy said Cullen knew medications like she had never seen. She thought that he had a passion for understanding the way that medications worked. And I'll say, I agree, but I don't think it was for altruistic reasons. Regardless, Detective Braun said that medical homicides are, quote, a bitch to work because they're tough cases to prove. And in this case, there were no witnesses, no footage, and no crime scenes preserved. Detective Baldwin contacted Mary Lund and asked if there was any more documents. She said she had given them all she had. So the police go back to Warren Hospital. There they discover all of the documents there had been destroyed. Classic. Detective Braun said at this point that they were desperate for a breakthrough in the case. They needed outside help. But from who? Well, on day 20 of the investigation, Dr. Bruce Ruck, you remember him, the toxicologist at the Poison Control Center in Newark, New Jersey, he got a call from Tim Braun asking about digoxin. And Dr. Ruck simply asked, are you calling about Somerset? Detective Braun goes silent before saying, what are you talking about? To which Dr. Ruck replied, we've been telling them they have a murderer for some time. Detective Braun replied, I'll be there in 15 minutes.
First of all, this is giving the vibes of you and I reading the interview statements when we play games.
Yes.
And I couldn't be happier. Um, this is nothing fascinates me more than when people know a crime is being committed and they
Yeah.
just go, yeah, and they let it go.
Yeah.
Like money laundering, stealing from the company, sure. Don't respect those, but you know what I mean? I could see
Yep.
people being like, uh-huh, not my circus, not my monkeys. But when it's murder, maybe,
When it's murders
you
at
know?
a hospital, at a series
Yeah,
of medical facilities. Yeah.
yeah, that feels like maybe it's the time to take action. But, obviously there's a lot more to go, and we are gonna learn a lot more after the break. But first, we're gonna need more water because Lord knows I'm sure more of us were out in the sun for too long than
Yep.
we need. And then if you're gonna have more water, do what Lauren says, which is my favorite thing: get your butt over a bowl.
Yep.
Do what you need to do.
Yep.
Get yourself a snack. Use the bathroom. Get a drink, and we'll be back with more on the Charles Cullen episode on True Crime and Cocktails.
All right. Clap two on three. 1, 2, 3.
Welcome back to True Crime and Cocktails. On the break, I know you'll be happy to know I did quickly search. The doctor's name on Twilight was Carlisle. I know that was killing us all. I know we all had to know. Um, Played by Peter Facinelli. Is that how
Oh,
you say it?
sure. Yep.
AKA Mike Dexter from Can't Hardly Wait. But if you're gonna Can't Hardly Wait, it's obviously Preston or nothing. So before the break, and before that mad IMDb search, because I we all had to know, Lauren was talking about toxicologist Dr. Rook.
Yeah.
And like he obviously knew what was going on long before anybody else. That man is a champion for being like, that name? Oh, you mean this person? Yeah, it's a problem. So
Yeah.
where are we going from there?
We're going right back to that poison control center. Now, who works with Dr. Ruck? Another doctor, Dr. Stephen Marcus, who was the medical director at the Poison Control Center from 1983 to 2016. Quite a career.
Oh,
When Dr. Ruck had told him what was going on, he asked Dr. Marcus if he would be willing to talk to the police, to which Dr. Marcus simply said, "Damn straight."
well.
And it's so funny that you brought that up because I wrote in my notes, these men are desperate to try and help solve this crime. Like just
And that's
these guys,
honestly what you like to see.
it's very refreshing. It's a beautiful thing. And also they're going, we have science. There's something that we're telling you something is
Yeah.
wrong. Like we're
Yeah.
please let us help you.
We have medical evidence if you're
Exactly.
interested.
If you're interested.
Yeah.
So Detective Braun said that when Dr. Marcus greeted them, he simply said, "Where have you been? You should have been here months ago."
Yep.
So he had recordings of the calls between them and Mary Lund. And when the police listened to them, it was very obvious that the hospital was not telling the police the full truth. Dr. Marcus had told the hospital that if someone was out there doing this deliberately and then the hospital didn't report this to the police and someone else died, he simply said, "Well, I would I would not waste time." So on that same call, at that point in the call, you can hear a male hospital rep simply respond, "Well, we appreciate your input," which is so classic because then it took the hospital 3 more months to report anything to the police. And even when they did, as we know, they only gave them minimal info. Detective Braun believes that the hospital was absolutely covering up. Dr. Ruck said that the hospital didn't want word getting out. If word on the street is, "Don't go there, you have a high risk of death," people aren't going to go. Doctors won't want to bring their patients there, and consequently, the hospital could stand to lose a lot of money. Then the hospital board would start firing people, and so they probably figured they should just sweep it all under the rug. So at this point, the police want to see what other hospitals that Cullen worked for were doing the same thing. Were there other things being covered up and not reported? They needed to know this information as soon as possible. So Detective Baldwin goes to meet the Pennsylvania State Police once again to get more info about their investigation from the elusive Stickum note. The Pennsylvania detective said they believed Cullen was stealing medications but wouldn't say more over the phone. In person, he got into more detail. Detective Egan said he was looking at the mortality rate at St. Luke's Hospital, and he showed Detective Baldwin some of his reports saying that a nurse straight up told him that Cullen was killing patients. Just straight up said, "I know he's doing it." She had the courage to say that to the police. Who was
For
that
her.
woman? That woman was Pat Medellin. So, Pat Medellin worked at St. Luke's Hospital in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania from 2002 to 2004. She worked with Cullen at the small ICU there. She said they had a nice, tight group of people that worked well together. She also said that Cullen was quirky and had his oddities, but that ICU nurses are, quote, kind of weird. Her quote, not mine. She said that she was there the night that Cullen was taken out and was asked to resign at 2 or 3 in the morning. She said everything about that was very hush hush. A day or so later, she called a coworker asking what was going on, and the coworker said there were 50 vials of medication that were found discarded in the needle box. Many were unused, but some were used. And that's when Pat said she began to think twice about the whole thing. Prior to Cullen being let out of the hospital that night, in the middle of the night, she said there was a time twice within 1 week that she had patients who were stable but coded, and it didn't make sense to her. So then she did something that we here at True Crime and Cocktails deeply respect. She started to make a list.
Oh, yes.
She made a list of all the people who had passed in that time with their names, dates, time of death, etc. She said there was 67 deaths in total. She personally felt it was statistically reasonable that Charles Cullen would have been on duty for about a quarter of them, which would be 17-ish people. But she saw his name tied to 40 of those patients, 40 of the 67 deaths, more than twice the number that would even statistically make sense. When one patient of hers coded while Cullen was on him, she reached out to her manager and her director, and she said she was sure Cullen was killing people. And they said, nope, we're sure he's not. They said they had already investigated and had ruled it out. She said she drove home crying that morning, and she called a friend who happened to be a police captain, and she said, quote, I don't know what to do with this. Nobody will listen. Nobody is taking any action to stop him, but I am absolutely certain he is killing a lot of patients, and I can't get anyone to listen. After multiple days, they turned the story over to the state police, but the investigation was slow. Now, at this point when watching the documentary, I was watching with my very sweet boyfriend. And at this point, he goes, stop, go back. It's probably irrelevant. In this moment, I realized I had been looking down. And while I was looking down making notes, there was a document that had flashed up on the screen. So immediately I was like, oh, no, honey, thank you. Not irrelevant. In my mind, I was like, this is so sweet. He's getting into it. He's seeing like, uh-oh, there might be something she wants to pause and read on that document. He's getting the research. So I go back, and then he said, look at this thumb. It was the thumb holding the document. That was what he wanted me to go back to see. Now, in his defense, the thumb did have a mangled nail, so it was a little bit of note. But we had a good long laugh about that I was like, I really thought that you were getting into helping me research, and in reality, it was just like, look at the weird thumb. Anyway.
It shows how people watch documentaries versus how we do.
Exactly.
Where he's hearing what's happening, but he's looking at something in a different way, whereas we're like, what can I see that I can use as a jumping off point?
Maybe if I pause, maybe there's something written on that document that they're not talking about.
Yep. Forever business with us. And he's the one that's like, you know what? Stop and look at the joy in the world.
Yeah. Look at the weird thumb. Stop and look at the weird thumb instead of stop and smell the roses.
I like that a lot.
That's a t-shirt.
Yeah.
So one evening, Pat Medellin was on duty, and the CEO of the hospital called all of the nurses into the lounge and announced that the investigation was closed and the state police had found that Cullen had not done anything wrong. There were rumors amongst her coworkers saying, whatever nurse reported this caused a lot of havoc for the hospital and nearly cost St. Luke's the construction of their new site. So it seemed that in order to borrow money to do this new construction that they wanted to do, they had to report any potential lawsuits. So it seemed that maybe that was their main focus. They didn't want to be penalized or lose money on their deal. So it was just easier to give Cullen a nice reference and let him resign rather than actually deal with the whole murder thing. It should be noted that St. Luke's is a U.S. top 100 rated hospital, an enormous ecosystem of healthcare. They had a bond rating out for the whole new campus at the time, so they just wanted Cullen out of there as quietly and quickly as possible. Now, I know what you're thinking. What is a bond rating? Don't worry, I'm going to tell you. A bond rating is a way to measure the creditworthiness of a bond. Private independent rating services evaluated a bond issuer's financial strength or its ability to pay a bond's principal and interest in a timely fashion. The higher a bond's rating, the lower interest rate it will carry due to the lower risk. So you can understand how if they had a good bond rating, they would not want to jeopardize that and lose money. Because, of course, this is a business.
Right.
So the pattern that detectives were seeing with the cases involving Charles Cullen was that the investigations would always stop due to lack of evidence. The administrators all felt that he was up to no good, as these types of incidents followed him in almost every place that he worked. But at this point, Detective Braun was just determined that this was going to end here. Their case was not going to fall out the same way all the others did. So Detective Baldwin focused on the Pyxis transactions. The Pyxis machine is a computerized medication dispensing machine. Detective Baldwin wanted to see what types of medications Cullen was withdrawing. During his first meeting with Mary Lund back in October, she said that the Pyxis machine only held information for 30 days, which seemed a little odd to police. So, Detective Braun, in a total badass move, contacted the manufacturer of all Pixis machines located in California. The rep was shocked because he stated that all data needed was retrievable from the unit from all time. There was no 30-day limit. At this point, it was official. The police were absolutely being played by those hospital administrators. Straight up lying. Detective Braun said at this point it was flatly criminal what they were doing. So Detective Baldwin goes straight to Mary Lund's office and explained that if she didn't give up the information, they would be taking the machines and having the FBI forensics team do their own analysis. She picked up the phone and, surprisingly, she was immediately able to obtain the exact information that he needed. Isn't that interesting?
Jesus.
So, police were able to put certain medications in Charles Cullen's possession at the times that the incidents were occurring with patients on the unit. This was a huge breakthrough, but they were still a ways away from actually charging him. So they needed to get him physically away from his current patients. Here's something that I love. They were like, yes, we know this guy is doing this. We don't have enough information. We don't have enough evidence. But our number one priority, unlike the hospitals in question, was to get him away from people that were vulnerable to him at this time. So what did police do? They looked and found a discrepancy in one of his resumes and had him fired.
For them.
Yes. Cullen was fired and let out of the building by security. Donna Hargreaves couldn't understand why they would ever fire such a good nurse. Amy Lauren was shocked. Cullen called Amy and told her that they fired him because he had not been completely honest on his application. Amy was very concerned about him at the time, as she said he seemed quite depressed. Now that he was removed from hospital, police thought it would be a good time to question all of his coworkers. Had they observed Cullen doing anything strange? Amy said they were asking a lot of questions, and the nurses had started running over things in their own minds. Because Charlie was such a great nurse, if he could get fired, a nurse who was that good, any of the rest of them could be next, right? So they were very scared for their jobs going into these interviews. Detective Braun wanted to move the process along as fast as he could, but the hospital made a request asking for Mary Lund to be present, sitting in on each meeting. So now these nurses who are already a little bit scared about their jobs are also obviously going to fear cooperating with the police in front of a woman who is ostensibly their boss. So the detectives got nowhere in these interviews. However, the one name that kept coming up over and over again in all of these meetings was Amy Lauren. She was the last to be interviewed, and Detective Baldwin was like, I'm interviewing her myself, because this was the final chance that they had to get anything. Amy said that Mary Lund coached her prior to the meeting. Amy was obviously very close to Cullen and was very defensive of him from the start. Partway through that meeting, Mary Lund excused herself, saying she had to leave. In my opinion, she probably felt safe leaving because Amy herself admitted she was going really hard at Detective Baldwin because she was so defensive of Charlie Cullen. Detective Baldwin said that he liked that she was so defensive of him, that it was like, all right, let me give you a little bit of information. Let's see how you deal with this if you're his best friend that will defend him to the end. So he revealed some information about the case. Like in a movie, he pushed a piece of paper across the desk with the Pixis printouts. She reads them and immediately simply says, wow. It was like she was finally seeing the truth for the first time. She said, just looking at those printouts, it was so obviously something sinister was going on. It made her remember a time when she was at the nurse's station, saw a patient go into VTech. She yells code blue. But when she got into the room with the patient, Cullen was already with that patient, and he was injecting the patient with something. So Amy asked what medication he was giving. Cullen said lidocaine. She thought that was odd. She said it was a very brief moment where she thought, why is he giving the patient that? So they're doing CPR, continuing giving lidocaine. The doctor, the resident at the time, arrives. Amy gives him the prognosis, and he says, who gave this patient lidocaine? Amy, in that moment, came to Cullen's defense and said that she had done it. She was the code leader at the time, and she said she had ordered that the patient be given lidocaine. She obviously wanted to protect Cullen in this moment and was trying to be a good friend. But at that moment, the resident revealed that this was a massive problem because that patient was allergic to lidocaine. Yeah.
Huh.
Amy said of that incident, so I basically walked in on him murdering someone and I didn't see it and I didn't think about it. After that, I had the revelation. After I had that revelation, I watched Detective Baldwin and watched for his response. This is in the meeting. And Detective Baldwin mouthed the words to her, "Will you help me?" At this
This
point,
this
yeah,
is like a movie.
it's literally like a movie in real life, for real. She said that she doesn't remember driving home after that interview with Detective Baldwin that day. She just remembers getting home and calling Donna. Donna said it felt like a tidal wave for the patients, for their families, and for the fact that they all trusted Charles Cullen. So now we're on day 48 of the investigation, and it's a day or so after Amy's interview. The detectives decided that they'd go visit her at home. They thought that if they could convince her to work with them, they would have someone on the inside. So they brought over the Pixis printouts, as it's basically in a different language that the police officers can't speak. They asked Amy what she saw. She said that she saw multiple cancellations. They included deadly medications. She said it looked like Cullen was going in under a patient's name, pressing digoxin. That drawer opens. He would take the medication, but then he would cancel the interaction. So I guess the whole idea is that it's like, oops, didn't actually mean that, but then he's pocketing those medications.
Right.
Now,
Oh,
this is very interesting to me because if you think back to the first time I told you to put a pin in something in this episode, in that pamphlet, he talked about one of the things he really liked was like the computer
the
systems and the
technology. Yeah.
technology. And what's really twisted and sick about that to me is the fact that it was those computers and that technology that was allowing him to continue to kill people for his 16-year career. It should also be noted, and I'll get into this more later, he was speaking specifically of Somerset Medical Center when he made that quote, and that was where we believe, the police believe, he committed the most murders throughout his time. Perhaps it
I
was
mean,
because of that easy technology.
I don't love the idea of like a drug vending machine, but
Yeah.
like I can't believe in that way there isn't like a way to make it so you can't keep doing that repeatedly.
Well, I think the way that I think the way they were trying to make that is the Pixis machine keeping this record. But the whole point is that if nobody's paying attention to it and then those records go missing,
Yeah.
it
It's
does
just
feel like
someone needs to be looking at it.
right. Or it should be programmed to like alert, alert, too many canceled, right? Like
Yes.
it's like if you're trying to put your password into a website, it's like you have three more chances. You know what I mean? It's like, isn't there some way that they could be like three more chances or you're locked out?
It's harder to get into my Hotmail than it is to get drugs out of one of those machines.
Deadly medications. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So the detectives are over at Amy's house. They're looking at these printouts. And just then, Amy's phone rings and it's the risk manager herself, Mary Lund. Amy was very shocked and suspicious. Why was Mary Lund calling her at home? Mary started questioning if Amy had spoken to the detectives after her meeting. She advised Amy that she shouldn't talk to the police unless there was a hospital rep with her at the time. The joke is that at that exact moment, the detectives were in the same room with her trying to listen in on the phone call. Yeah.
amazing.
So at this point, Amy talks about how she had a lot to lose in this scenario. She had her career, she had her family. She did also have health issues. She had been diagnosed with a heart condition, and she was trying to keep it a secret from the hospital because she was a single mom of two daughters. She didn't want to become disabled and then not be able to have insurance. Obviously, she was only getting health insurance because of that job. Uh, so there was a lot kind of riding on her involvement in this police investigation for her personally. So she said she felt like she needed to talk to her daughter. She told her daughter that she was working with someone who could be hurting people, possibly killing people, and that she had an opportunity to prevent him from hurting anyone else. Her daughter said, if you have an opportunity to stop a killer, of course you have to stop him. Amy felt it was wild that an 11-year-old had more moral aptitude than Mary Lund. I thought it was wild. She felt the need that she needed to consult her 11-year-old daughter about all of this, but I don't have kids, so maybe I guess I just don't get it.
Yeah. I get the like, I can't risk losing my job. I can't
Right.
risk losing like all of these things. Um, but yeah, to turn to an 11-year-old and be like, so there's someone I know who's killing people. We've done nothing about it. When you go to the hospital
Yeah.
healthy, sometimes you can die
Yeah.
because people are killing you. Dozens of them, literally dozens. Not you. I'm sure you'll be fine. But the point is, he's killing so many people. What do I do? Okay, good night. Like that just feels, you know what I mean? It just feels like that's not
You want me
maybe
to
a
leave the door
thought.
open a crack? Yeah, I
If
don't know.
why do you want to sleep with the light on? That's weird. Like it just feels like, I mean, beautiful that she has that relationship with her child, but don't put it on the child to be the one to be like, you should do something.
Yeah. It was just interesting to me because as we'll continue to talk, like obviously she's a massive part of all of this, which is fantastic and amazing. It was just interesting to me that she really felt like she needed to get that message through. That it was like I had to consult my 11-year-old, and my 11-year-old told me
Mm,
to do this. It was just interesting. It was like that to me speaks to people to like state of mind.
sure.
Yeah. So at this point, we're on day 50 of the investigation. Amy let the police start to record her calls with Cullen. She knew she had to keep the relationship with him going. At this point, everyone knew he was a mass murderer. So they really wanted to make sure he wasn't going to disappear, or more importantly, get another job as a nurse. Cullen told Amy he was looking for a job at that time, so the police knew time was absolutely running out. 2 days later, Amy gives detectives some advice on patterns to look for. She felt like she was a part of their team, and even though she felt like she was a small voice, she spoke the language that none of them could speak. So she asked, where are the charts from Cerner? They had no idea what she was talking about. Apparently, the Cerner records are all of the records of all of the patients. Without the Cerner printouts, it would be hard to, quote, put the syringe in his hand. Where was he at what time doing what? Again, this is how that technology is going to, he may have liked that technology, but that technology may have also bit him in the end. So at that time, Amy would go into work, and then, well, whenever she had a spare minute, she would start printing out patient records to take looks at them. Now, she could have been charged by the hospital for doing this, but at this point, she was going rogue because she knew she needed answers. Detective Braun said that they all used different pieces of information to cross reference all of the different pieces of information. There was a paper trail, so if they could prove one death, they'd be able to get Cullen. But no body, no crime. They needed a body. Reverend Gall, who we talked about at the very beginning, they felt was the strongest case, even though it had happened 7 months prior. They needed to get the toxicology that there was digoxin from his body tissue. Now, his sister Lucille Gall said she never thought a cop would talk through the door and say your brother was killed. She thought it was impossible. He said that they would want to exhume Reverend Gall's body, and would she give consent? Now, obviously, that is a lot for any family to deal with, to have to deal with not only having the body of your loved one dug up, but also to have to deal with a reburial. She said that you almost want to say in those situations, just let him rest in peace. But she didn't. Why? Because Lucille Gall was a nurse. And when she found out that a nurse may have violated his oath and killed her brother, she was like, yeah, it's not going to be a problem. I give you my consent.
Good for her. Shout
Absolutely.
out, Lucille.
Yes, absolutely. So they exhume Reverend Gall's body. The body is taken to the state medical examiner's office for an autopsy. And absolutely, there was so much digoxin found in his body that it was enough to change the cause and manner of his death from natural death, as the hospital had reported, to homicide.
Mm.
But the detectives knew, once again, they were still lacking a couple of pieces of evidence that juries often like to see. Juries like something physical. We know this. They want to see the actual syringe that killed the person, something like that. But we also know it's not always that easy. So, 2 days later, Amy said Cullen called to tell her he'd gotten a new job. So she immediately calls Detective Braun to let him know time is of the essence. They knew that if he took that job, Cullen would absolutely kill again. They were officially out of time. So the detectives asked Amy to meet with Cullen and wear a wire. Like I said, this case is like a movie. So the detectives are positioned in a parking lot. Amy is terrified. She walks into the restaurant to meet Cullen, who then hugged her for the first time ever. Of course, in that moment, she's terrified that he's going to feel the wire box, which is a little black box that was taped to the small of her back. Luckily, he did not. There was a ton of background noise in the restaurant. Music, it's a bustling happy hour, so the recording is very hard to hear and understand, but they played part of it in the documentary, and you can hear Cullen say, quote, "I had a problem when I first started out, an incident with low blood sugar. And at Warren Hospital, a patient had died 24 hours after I had been her nurse. Someone said the son had said that I injected her." We know now, of course, that he was obviously referencing Harry Dean and her son, Larry. Helen Dean and her son, Larry. I think I said Harry.
Yeah.
I conflated the two names. You know what I'm talking about.
You're doing great.
So in this conversation, Amy asks Cullen, "What about Father Gall? What happened? Charlie, what happened?" Cullen says, "I can't." Amy says, "I know you can. I see you and I'm not stupid. So why? You're so good. Why? Let me help you." And then the wire goes dead. It just shorts out.
Oh my God.
What a shit show. Again, if we had scripted this, it would feel maybe even impossible, the fiction being stranger than the truth. So Amy talks about what she said to him in that moment, even though there is no recording of it. She said that she told him she knew he did it and that she still loved him. And she said then for the first time, it wasn't Charlie. She said he became pale, he stiffened, he turned his head, his voice changed. She said, "I was not with my friend Charlie. I was not. It was emptiness. It wasn't darkness. It wasn't a monster. It was just nothingness. He didn't care about me. He didn't care about anything. He just said, I want to go down fighting."
Oh, Lord.
When he left the restaurant that night, Cullen was approached by Detectives Braun and Baldwin. They asked if he would take a ride with them. Then they told him he was being placed under arrest for the murder of Reverend Gall. They weren't confrontational. They were just calmly talking to him, and he just kept saying, quote, "I just can't. I just can't." In the interrogation room, he wrapped his knees to his chest, and they said it felt like he was holding in, that it was like very obvious that it was like the truth was right there at the surface, but it was not coming out of his mouth. The detectives said they were willing to push Cullen harder, which is something we know police detectives love to do. Yeah. But they said, quote, "Those observing them said enough was enough." Now, if we know anything from watching Law and Order SVU, it was likely the prosecutor or the district attorney. You know what I'm saying? We have those scenes on that show all the time where it's like, stop abusing them. You're badgering this person. You can't do this, etc. So at this point, Detective Braun said he felt their chance for a confession was completely gone. So who do they call? Of course, Nurse Amy. Amy gets the call from Detective Braun saying that they had devised a plan for her to talk to Cullen. So she goes in, and she said when she saw Cullen shackled in his scrubs with his laceless sneakers, she felt like it was like seeing a child. She said she didn't feel anger towards him. She actually felt a wave of guilt for betraying a friend. They took off his shackles, and the two of them started talking like normal. She said it was bizarre how ordinary it felt. But then she said she thought about who she was really supposed to be protecting. He had murdered some of the most vulnerable people, people who were tied down, medicated, unable to protect themselves, and it was her job to defend them because she hadn't before. She knew she would do anything to get a confession out of Cullen. So then she said to him, quote, "My life as I know it is about to end because I'm being implicated. You get to be my hero today. You get to do that. You do. And I'm going to ask you one question. How did you kill Father Gall?" And he immediately responded that he injected him with digoxin. Just like that. Amy lied and got the confession. He immediately gave up the truth. To me, it feels like it was because he did have the chance to be her hero, and his own narcissism was kind of, she was very smart to feed into that because it was giving him a chance to feel like he was all powerful, which is very interesting to me. Detective Braun said that with that, they had enough. They pull Amy out of the room. They take Cullen to a new interview room and basically told him, all right, now you can talk. Let's go. So it's Sunday, December 14th, 2003, 6:14 p.m. And yes, this is the conversation. I'm not going to do it in characters. It feels disrespectful to the topic, but if this was a lighter topic or a game we were playing, just know I would absolutely be doing
Of
two characters.
course, I will just have to envision the accents you would have chosen.
Thank you very much. So the detective asked, was it after that conversation with your friend you decided to talk? Cullen responded, yes. Florian Gall, are you responsible for his death? Yes, I am. And why is that? I injected him with a medication called digoxin. How did that make you feel? I was relieved that he wasn't attached to all those machines anymore. So at this point, the detectives were like, great, we got our confession. They were really not expecting him to tell them anything else. So they were not totally prepared for the journey Charles Cullen was about to take them on. Cullen said, and I quote, I felt very compelled, very driven to end suffering as I saw it. I would go long periods of time with nothing, but then I would find myself getting back feeling overwhelmed, feeling like I couldn't watch people hurt, die, be treated like non-humans. I have destroyed not only those people's God, destiny, and caused probably a lot of suffering for those families, but I have also hurt people that I love very much and didn't for the world want to do that. I love my children very much and very much wanted to be a part of their lives, but I just couldn't stop myself. I did not want the people to see me as this, what I am. Detective Braun asks, what are you, Charles? He responds, a person who is trusted and has been responsible for a lot of people dying. Then Cullen reveals, I have contaminated IV infusion bags with insulin. I don't remember the specific patients or whatever. Detective Baldwin asks, is there any particular reason you might do that? Just pot luck? I don't know if pot luck is the expression, but this isn't the time for me to point that out.
It's not, but okay.
Cullen said, I guess the majority of patients were very critical. So Amy is watching this interview from a room on a monitor. And she said that, oh, yeah. She said when she heard Cullen was using the bags, she went back in her mind to those moments where she would go into the storage room, pick up one of those IV bags, and go and take it to a patient. She would be the one delivering patients those deadly medications without even knowing. All of the nurses were. All of the nurses, all of the team members prepared his victims for him and then delivered the poison for him. She had wanted him to be a mercy killer, that he really believed he was putting people out of their misery. But in this moment, she realized that was not the case. There's also the fact that many of the patients Cullen killed were on the road to recovery. In some cases, they were being prepared for discharge, like Helen Dean, because their conditions had improved. Pat Medellin offered, quote, this isn't anything you can understand. This isn't something you can reason. One of the medications that Charlie used was, vecuronium, which is a paralytic. A person would be completely alert and awake and aware, but unable to speak, blink, breathe, or anything else. They would literally just be paralyzed in their awake body, unable to breathe as they slowly proceeded to death.
Oh my God.
Just horrific. So again, any sort of argument that he's trying to make that he really felt like he wanted to put people out of their misery is absolute bullshit. This is some story that he's concocted for himself, or that he's concocting to try and save face.
Sure.
So Detective Braun asks Cullen, can you tell us in total throughout your entire 15 to 16 year career how many patients you helped to their death? He said, possibly 30 to 40 patients. So at this point, that's more people than anyone has killed in the history of New Jersey. He killed a dozen at Somerset alone. And, skipping forward, he showed no remorse in court. He told the judge, quote, I don't wish to be represented. I don't plan to contest the charges. I plan to plead guilty. He then signed a plea deal that spared him the death penalty if he participated fully with the investigation. But let's also not forget there are some other people responsible for his actions, in my opinion, and the opinion of, the filmmaker and Charles Graeber, who wrote the book. Because this is a great example. Cullen said, quote, most of the hospitals I've worked at, they've strongly suspected that there were deaths associated with me. Detective Braun asked him, why do you think they didn't take it any further? And Cullen replied, I think they were worried about the publicity. And he was right. If protecting human life wasn't a priority for them, it's impossible to think about how low they were willing to stoop to protect the interests of those hospitals. Dennis Miller, not that Dennis Miller, the CEO and president of Somerset Medical Center, took no responsibility for any of this. He actually commended Mary Lund for her great work investigating Cullen and even bragged that they were the ones that led to him getting caught. Now, I will remind you, detectives said that this hospital was literally criminal in how they handled this by not giving information, by lying to the police. So that's a cool story, Dennis Miller, but I'm not buying it. The one thing he said that did chill me, however, was, quote, the problem is that the other employers we called said he left in good standing and his license was intact. He said that they did the usual criminal background check and followed up on all of his references. So when you think about it, that's how Charles Cullen was able to do this for 16 years at 10 different facilities. Because the fact is, he was caught over and over and over again. And those who did catch him either ignored it or covered it up and passed him along to the next facility. They would give positive or neutral references. If you ask me, or again, anybody else involved in the coverage of this case, that is the real scandal when we're talking about the Charles Cullen case. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison, but what about all of the hospital administrators that passed him along? Those people are paid a lot of money to be responsible. None of them are being held responsible. They did a great job at their job, which is protecting the institution of private for-profit healthcare. But they did not protect patients or provide patient care. They failed, and they have been rewarded for their success of protecting the institution over the patients. So, to sum up, Charles Cullen admitted to the murder of 29 patients and the attempted murder of 6 more. He was sentenced to 18 consecutive life sentences in March 2006, but experts believe he may have killed as many as 400 people, which would, as I stated earlier, make him the most prolific serial killer in American history. Following his confession in 2003, Somerset Medical Center and other New Jersey hospitals supported the passage of the Cullen Law. It requires healthcare providers to report to the state any employee's impairment, incompetence, or misconduct that could affect patient safety. It also requires those reports to be disclosed to potential future employers. My question is, even though the law exists, are they doing it? St. Luke's Hospital says it fully investigated Charles Cullen, yet it also says that they didn't find any evidence of patient harm until after Cullen's confession in 2003. The Pennsylvania State Police backed that up, saying they also didn't find any evidence of patient harm until after his confession in 2003. St. Luke's says the hospital expansion was also never a consideration in any decisions that it made regarding the Cullen investigation, and I say, bullshit.
Yeah.
Since his sentencing, Cullen has been imprisoned in New Jersey State Prison, where he remains to this day. And that is where the documentary ends. And that, dear listeners, is where I begin. Because I need to know what drove this man to kill. So,
Of course.
Now we brought you to that elusive bit of the show that I said to stick a pin in, to get ready. I promise you I'd get to it all later. Here we go. This is where I sing.
I love you so much.
Well, I was just like, the documentary ended, and I'm like, okay, this is a wild story, and I completely agree that the people running these facilities are absolutely have blood on their hands. But what? I mean, you know me. I live for the psychology of this. I have to have any sort of context about why anyone is able to take a life. And don't worry, of course, I found it. So let's go back to the very beginning. Charles Cullen was born on February 22nd, 1960 in West Orange, New Jersey. He was the youngest of 8 siblings and grew up in New Jersey in a working-class Catholic family. His father, Edmund, a bus driver, died on September 17th, 1960, when Cullen was just 7 months old. Charles was said to have had a miserable childhood and had attempted suicide at age 9. He did so by drinking a mixture from a home chemistry set. He's claimed to have been constantly bullied by his schoolmates and his sister's boyfriends in his childhood. Cullen's mother, Florence Cullen, was born in England and emigrated to the U.S. after World War II as a war bride. She was killed in a car accident on December 6, 1977. Cullen, then 17 years old at the time, was a senior in high school. He recalled his mother's death as being devastating and described being upset that the hospital did not immediately inform him of her death and cremated her body instead of returning it to the family. After her death, Cullen attempted suicide once again. Following that, tragedy compounded for Cullen as a young man. His brother died from a drug overdose in their family home, and another of Cullen's brothers would later die from cancer. Cullen dropped out of high school in 1978 and enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He served aboard the submarine USS Woodrow Wilson. He had successfully passed basic training and the psychological examinations required for submarine crews. Obviously, if you're going to work on a submarine, you also have to be able to be in a very tight space for a long
Yep.
period of time. But again, it's interesting because we know at this point he does have a history of suicide attempts, but it sounds to me like he did not disclose that in these psych evaluations. Cullen rose to the rank of petty officer second class as part of the team that operated the vessel's Poseidon missiles. It's said that he did not fit in during his time in the Navy and that he was hazed and bullied by his fellow crewmen. A year into his service, Cullen's leading petty officer aboard the Woodrow Wilson discovered Cullen seated at the missile controls, wearing a surgical mask, gloves, and scrubs instead of his traditional uniform. He was obviously disciplined for that action, but never explained why he had dressed that way. He was reassigned to a lower ranking job on the USS Canopus, and he once again attempted suicide. He was then sent to the Navy psychiatric ward, where he was committed several times over the subsequent few years. He then received a medical discharge from the Navy in 1984, which they listed as for undisclosed reasons. Feels to me like it was for mental health reasons.
Mm-hmm.
After leaving the Navy, he began studying nursing at Mountainside Hospital Nursing School in New Jersey. He was elected president of his nursing class and graduated in 1986. Cullen and Adrienne Tobe met and got married in 1987. By 1993, the couple were divorced. At the time, they had 2 daughters together. According to court documents from the Warren County Family Court in New Jersey, Adrienne filed a restraining order against Cullen, accusing him of extreme cruelty. He claimed he was cruel to their dogs, citing one incident in which he zipped a dog into a bowling bag. He also claimed that Cullen had spiked people's drinks with lighter fluid, burned his daughter's books, prank called funeral homes, and left his daughters with a babysitter for a week. Cullen denied these claims, saying his wife was exaggerating, but nevertheless, she continued to insist that Cullen was deeply mentally ill. So, going back to another pin I told you to put in things, maybe this would be why his family wasn't shocked the police were investigating him when they started to poke around.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I also feel like if the documentary reached out to this ex-wife, she'd be like, "I'll be there."
Yeah. Even if she doesn't want her face on camera, I feel like it's sounding like she would at least be willing to tell her story.
Yeah.
And again, to me, this is all massive information for so many reasons. First of all, not only just to understand or attempt to understand his state of mind and why he committed these crimes, but it also is a part of like, how does the hospital system work? Like that restraining order, that criminal trespass charge we know that he got later, like none of that really mattered. It would have come up again on these background checks. And to
Right.
me, also, like, I don't know, like military records, I don't know how those are, being, if those can be accessed or not. But the point is that at this point, when he's graduating from nursing school, we also know he has multiple times he's attempted to take his own life. We know that he's had a deep amount of
Yep.
trauma in childhood. We know that a few years later, his wife is saying that he has this history of very erratic, violent behaviors. Does this feel like a great candidate to be a nurse? Well, I
Yeah.
think, as we know, no, he's proven that to be the case.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
I'll also get into that a little bit more in a second. So, the first murder that Cullen has admitted to occurred in 1988, which is just 2 years into his nursing career at the St. Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston. He was working in the burn unit. The victim was a 72-year-old municipal court judge named John W. Yengo Sr. Cullen administered an overdose of lidocaine, one of his drugs of choice, which of course is an anesthetic and a painkiller that can depress the respiratory and cardiovascular system. Yengo was suffering from a severe case of sunburn.
This really,
Hitting
this
home.
really, yeah, this really turned a corner. Yeah.
He was receiving treatment for it at the time. Cullen eventually admitted to killing several other patients at St. Barnabas, including an AIDS patient who died after Cullen gave him an overdose of insulin. Cullen left St. Barnabas in January 1982 when the hospital began investigating contaminated IV bags. The internal investigation identified Cullen as the perpetrator, resulting obviously in dozens of patients' deaths at the hospital, but they allegedly didn't have enough evidence to prove it. So instead of contacting the authorities or firing Cullen, St. Barnabas allowed him to simply move on to another hospital. I want to remind you, this was literally at the beginning of his killing career. Think of the lives that could have been saved. So we now know that on top of the patients he was injecting directly with syringes, he would also inject these lethal drugs into bags of saline, which he would leave in the storerooms. So any nurses could have been using those bags and unknowingly delivering these lethal doses of medications into people's bloodstreams. So the other thing is that when you think about the capacity for which he killed people, we'll never know. Unless we're going to exhume all of those bodies, there's no way to know. He worked in this career field for 16 years, and he was contaminating these IV bags and leaving them. Again, this is why I think the experts were like, it could be well over 400. It could even be more than that.
I mean, the idea of being injected with something is already terrifying.
Yeah.
But the idea of him putting it in the IV bags and someone could innocently give you that without even knowing what's in it.
Yep. And it's important to remember for context, because at this point you're going, how can this happen? Well, let's remember the units in which he was working in these hospitals were often intensive care units where death is not uncommon. The administration of powerful drugs is also commonplace in ICUs. So these factors were a big role in allowing him to get away with murder for a certain amount of time. Now, I also think there is absolute complicity on the hands of the Barnabas Medical Center if they did this internal investigation, discovered it was him tainting these bags, and then just let him move on.
100%.
So 1 month after leaving St. Barnabas, he begins working at Warren Hospital in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, where he killed at least 3 women with digoxin overdoses, one of which, of course, was Helen Dean. No investigation was launched because, once again, we know they didn't test for digoxin. So that was a major gaffe. Here's something interesting. Cullen took 2 months off from work and was treated for depression in 2 psychiatric facilities at this time. However, he also attempted suicide twice more by the end of that year. In the following year, 1993, Cullen moved into a basement apartment in Phillipsburg after his divorce. Cullen later claimed that he had wanted to quit nursing in 1993, but as we know, he said that he had to make these child support payments and had to continue working. In March 1993, as we also know, Cullen broke into his coworker's home. He had pled guilty to trespassing and received 1 year of probation. The day after that arrest, once again, he made another suicide attempt. So, after Warren Hospital, Cullen moved on to the ICU of Hunterdon Medical Center in Flemington, New Jersey, where he claimed at least 5 more victims in a period of 9 months in 1996 by administering overdoses of digoxin. After almost 3 years at Hunterdon, Cullen left to take a job at Morristown Memorial Hospital in Morristown, New Jersey. He was quickly fired due to poor performance and was unemployed for several months. After seeking treatment once again for depression in the Warren Hospital emergency room, he was briefly admitted to a psychiatric facility. Then he was hired at Liberty Nursing and Rehabilitation in Allentown, Pennsylvania in February 1998. He was fired from Liberty in October of the same year after colleagues saw him go into the room of a patient assigned to another nurse with multiple syringes. The elderly woman survived her encounter with him, but had a broken arm afterwards.
Oh.
Sounds to me like maybe he was trying to inject her with something and she was resisting.
Good for her.
It remains unclear what exactly happened in that room, but he also caused another patient's death at Liberty Hospital, which was blamed on another nurse. After leaving Liberty, Cullen was employed at Easton Hospital from November 1998 to March 1999. On December 30th, 1998, he murdered yet another patient. A coroner's blood test showed lethal amounts of digoxin in the patient's blood, but an internal investigation within Easton Hospital came up inconclusive. Evidence didn't definitively point to Cullen as the murderer. Here's the thing. If any of you talked to each other,
Yep.
didn't hide all of this,
yep.
So many opportunities for him to be stopped.
Oh, yeah.
Once again, even with his history of mental instability and the number of deaths during his employment at various hospitals rising, he continued to find work. It should be noted, there was also a national shortage of nurses. That's a real thing. That's a whole, we could do a whole other episode about that.
Sure.
Obviously, nurses are angels on earth.
Yep.
For the most part, of course, we're talking about one bad apple, but that does not mean that we're throwing out the bunch. Obviously, these people are ones that keep us alive. We have obviously great love for nurses, and a national shortage is a real thing, making it so that there is this fervor. You could see how potentially if a facility needed somebody, maybe they were willing to. Now, I'm not saying, again, this happens every time. This is, of course, an isolated incident. It's just infuriating because there needs to be stops to kind of protect from this kind of thing. It should also be noted once again that there was no reporting mechanism that existed at the time, identifying nurses with any sort of mental health or employment issues. Liability concerns also made hospitals unwilling to take significant action against Cullen throughout those years, as I've spoken about before. In March 1999, Cullen took a job at the burn unit of Allentown's Lehigh Valley Hospital, Cedar Crest, where he murdered one patient and attempted to murder another. 1 month later, he voluntarily resigned from Lehigh Valley Hospital and took a job working in the cardiac care unit at St. Luke's Hospital in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. During the subsequent 3 years, Cullen murdered at least 5 patients and is known to have attempted to kill 2 more. On January 11th, 2000, he once again attempted suicide by lighting a charcoal grill in his bathtub, hoping to succumb to carbon monoxide poisoning. His neighbors smelled smoke and called the fire department and the police. He was taken to a hospital and a psychiatric facility, but was returned home the following day. He resigned from St. Luke's after, of course, we remember the medication vials were discovered in the disposal bin. Rather than aiding in any sort of inquiry, he was offered a deal by St. Luke's to resign and was given a neutral recommendation. So he was escorted out, as we remember Pat Medellin talking about, in June 2002. 7 of his coworkers at St. Luke's later alerted the Lehigh County District Attorney of their suspicions that he had used drugs to kill patients. Investigators never looked into Cullen's past, and the case was dropped 9 months later for lack of evidence. Once again, that's nurses going to the police. This is the pattern that we see here, is that it's, again, hospital administration every single time failing all of us. In 2001, one nurse at Sacred Heart Hospital in Allentown had heard rumors of Cullen's crimes and shared them with her colleagues. The staff all threatened to quit if Cullen was not immediately dismissed, and he was. Once again, shouldn't be requiring of these coworkers to have to put their own jobs on the line to get this guy out of there.
Yeah.
But bless them for doing it. Late in 2002, Cullen began working in the critical care unit of Somerset Medical Center in New Jersey. Of course, this is where our whole story started at the beginning of this episode. As we know, this was his final place of employment. Here, he killed the majority of his known victims before being arrested, but let's also remember there's no way to know how often he was killing people by using those tainted IV bags. He apparently began dating a local woman around this time, but his depression also deeply worsened. They believe he killed at least 13 patients and attempted to kill at least one more by mid-2003 using digoxin, insulin, and epinephrine. On June 18th, 2003, he unsuccessfully attempted to murder Somerset patient Philip Gregor, who was later discharged and did die 6 months later of natural causes. That's just another interesting one that apparently I couldn't get any sort of insight about, like, how did they know that he attempted to kill him and how did he get away, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is, we know the rest of the story about Somerset from there. So skipping ahead, March 2nd, 2006, Cullen was sentenced, as I mentioned, to 18 consecutive life sentences by Judge Armstrong in New Jersey. He is not eligible for parole until June 10th, 2403. Safe to say, he ain't gonna make it that long. However, on March 10th, 2006, Cullen was brought into the courtroom of Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, with presiding judge William H. Platt for a sentencing hearing there. So because these crimes happened in different states, obviously he was charged and then sentenced in two separate states for the separate crimes.
Of course.
During this sentencing hearing, Cullen, who was upset with the judge, kept repeating, "Your Honor, you need to step down." The judge ordered Cullen to be quiet multiple times, but Cullen continued belligerently arguing with him. The marble walls of the courtroom only served to amplify the sound of his voice, and it became so disruptive that court officers had to place a mesh veil over his head in an effort to silence him. When he continued shouting, the officers secured a towel over his head to muffle his remarks, and then put duct tape over his mouth. In that hearing, he did end up getting an additional 6 life sentences. Again, these are details that I'm like, how did you leave that out?
Having to put duct tape over his mouth during hearing?
And I fact checked. And this is because I was like, is it just that this was like a urban myth or something? But I mean, I found many sources, reputable sources. So anyway, I just thought it was a wild detail to leave out. Investigators stated that Cullen may have caused patients to suffer but didn't realize it, which contradicted his claims of wanting to save patients. Similarly, Cullen told investigators that although he often observed patients suffering for several days, the decision to commit each murder was performed on impulse. He also told detectives in December 2003 that he lived most of his life in a fog, that he had blacked out memories of murdering most of his victims. He said he could not recall how many he killed or why he had chosen them. In some cases, he adamantly denied committing any murders at a given facility. However, after reviewing medical records, he would admit that he had been involved in patient deaths there. So again, this all feels to me like this is somebody who's just not wanting to take responsibility. I don't buy it, is my point. While in prison awaiting sentencing, Cullen received a letter from a former girlfriend asking for his help. Her brother, Ernie Peckham, who Cullen vaguely remembered meeting, needed a kidney. He had contracted an infection that had massively damaged both of his kidneys, and he had several young children who would be fatherless if a donor wasn't found. As fate would have it, Charles Cullen was a perfect 6-for-6 antigen match. This is how, in 2006, Cullen's attorney came to state that Cullen wanted to atone for his sins by donating one of his kidneys to Peckham. In order to get the donation approved, Cullen refused to cooperate with the investigators or appear at any legal hearings until his request was accepted. So, in August 2006, he was permitted to proceed with the kidney donation, which did save Peckham's life. Cullen said he was just trying to help somebody who was going to die without a kidney. His lawyer admitted, well, there's a certain amount of irony involved here. Many families of Cullen's victims felt the deal was a personal insult and that Cullen was being given too much power in the situation. The family members of the man who received the kidney, however, were obviously grateful. This is just a wild detail to me. I understand that it's superfluous, potentially to the documentary. But what's interesting to me about this is the power that this man had. I'm not going to help the police anymore, and I'm not going to show up to my legal proceedings unless you let me donate this kidney. And then they do?
Yeah, I also really love that this man is suffering and gonna die. I need to save him. And it's like, where was that 400 times ago?
Oh, yeah.
Ugh,
again, gross. I mean, this man is fascinating to me. During his, I just have a few final things to go through. During his confession, Cullen stated, quote, "I tried to kill myself throughout my life because I never really liked being who I was, because I didn't think I was worthy of anything." Charles Graeber, the author, of course, who interviewed Cullen several times in person. Well, I shouldn't say in person. He was interviewed several times for the book, claimed, quote, "Cullen sees himself as a victim, and as a victim, he's entitled to lash out in any way he wants to make things right. And if that means killing patients, anything justifies his victimhood." Charles Cullen has never apologized for his actions, nor has he have offered any real explanation. When questioned regarding the people who were on the mend and that he killed, he simply stated, quote, my goal here isn't to justify. You know what I did? There is no justification. I just think that the only thing I can say is that I felt overwhelmed at the time.
Overwhelmed is my constant state of being.
Yeah.
And I've killed 0 people.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah.
He further stated that if he hadn't been arrested, quote, "I don't know if I would have stopped." I think it's safe to say he wouldn't have.
Oh, no. At that point, no.
He also once said, and this is another quote, "I think you can say that I was caught at St. Barnabas and I was caught at St. Luke's. There's no reason that I should have been a practicing nurse after that. They said, if you resign, I'll give you neutral references. And I decided to go with that. I think because it's a matter of worrying about lawsuits. If they pointed out that there was a problem, the medical facilities were going to be liable for millions of dollars. They just thought it would be easier not to put themselves in a position of being sued. So that's the killer himself saying, the only reason I kept doing this was because they let me. There was no reason they should have let me continue to do this work.
Oh,
Straight up.
even he was like, how am I still employed? I don't
Yep.
know.
In
Oh,
2008, families of Cullen's New Jersey victims reached a confidential settlement with several hospitals. Their lawsuits were based on the claim that the hospitals had failed to warn Somerset Medical to hire Cullen. While several other suits were brought by other families, it was mainly Charles Cullen that was understandably targeted by them. In March 2010, a jury awarded the families $95 million in damages. The damages would allow the families to collect the money if Cullen ever decided to sell his story. There was no way, obviously, Cullen could even pay a small portion of it at that time. As far as public record shows, no other hospitals have had to directly answer for their negligence, despite there being plentiful evidence that points to them knowing what Cullen was doing. After the truth about Cullen was exposed, Mary Lund would find herself promoted to vice president of quality and risk services. She obviously maintains a low profile, but if you look for her, you can find her. Not that I would suggest it, just saying it's possible, potentially, allegedly. On June 1st, 2014, Somerset Medical Center would merge with Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital in New Brunswick, New Jersey. It would be renamed Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital Somerset as a campus in Somerville, New Jersey, in Somerset County in New Jersey. So just a reminder, even if it doesn't have the same name, it's the same hospital. And they gave a raise and a promotion to one of the people that helped cover up all of these murders. Not that I'm suggesting that anyone in New Jersey keep that in mind when they're going to certain places for medical care. I'm just saying, it's interesting. Reporting for True Crime and Cocktails, I'm Lauren Ash.
well, hot damn, Lady Jane.
Yeah.
What a fucking ride.
Right?
I have a lot of thoughts. I'll be honest. A lot of them are chaotic and not seemingly connected to what we're talking
I love
about.
it.
Sometimes I get in there, but I'm a lady who is out in the sun, who is in a room that is unbearably warm, but that could just be because I'm 40.
It
The point
might
is,
be.
I love that I just say I'm 40 to say I'm in my 40s. I'm not 40. I'm a little up from that, but I will continue to just go, I'm 40, meaning
Yep.
I'm just the decade.
Guess what? You're 40 until you're 50, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you so much. I'm just
Yep.
going to run with that. And then I'm going to run to have a tinkle because it is what it is. And then we're going to come back after the break and talk about my chaotic notes and our final thoughts on Charles Cullen on this episode of True Crime and Cocktails.
Right, clap three on three. 1, 2, 3.
Welcome back to True Crime and Cocktails. I realize now I don't even think I said we were going on a break. I just said, I got to piss. See ya. I believe I said it more cutesy with Tinkle, but still, you get the point across. The point is, it's not getting any less chaotic.
And I think that that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I wrote a lot of notes. Are a lot of them necessary? No,
Beautiful.
but it's just going to be what it's going to be. You said Amy, single mom. Of course, I immediately went, who works too hard? Like in my
Yep.
head, you
Yep.
know. You said Dr. Ruck. And first thing I thought of was Alan Ruck. And then, of course, I immediately heard him go, oh, darn. So shout out to Alan Ruck and the 1994 classic Speed.
100%.
Ah, you said you like to be thorough. I wrote, thorough is your middle name.
Bless.
Uh, Detective Tim Braun is a handsome name.
Yeah.
I specifically mean the name because I've never seen a photo or heard this man's voice. Specifically, Detective Tim Braun is hot to me.
Yeah.
The name. I don't know
Totally.
why. It all goes together very beautifully. Um, the fact that this man stalked a woman, tried to propose to her, and then broke into her house, and then said he had a fantasy that she was his girlfriend. I mean, the fact that I didn't look up a photo of this man to see, not that it would have made it any better if he was handsome. It's just a horror show. altogether. Uh, People should be safe at work and should be allowed to turn people down when they're not
Of
interested,
course.
and people should accept that. Um, you said Back to the Future. I immediately wrote down shout out to Doc and Marty, as though those are their names, which they are not. Stick'em note. No, nothing.
Never heard it in my life.
Not a thing
No,
in the world. But fun fact, Michelle's dad created Post-its. Shout out Romy and Michelle's high school reunion.
of course.
A bitch to work is an honest phrase that I appreciate. When they were
Yeah.
talking about medical cases are just a real bitch to work.
Yeah, I was like, it's fair. I going through this, I was like, I see his point. It's
Oh,
frustrating as hell.
100%. I also just couldn't love more. It gives you all the vibe you possibly could need from a detective when
Oh
they're
yeah.
like, oh, it's a real bitch. I'm like, yes, that's the kind of attitude I want for some reason. Because I also love when asked if they would help out, the answer was damn straight.
Yep.
Couldn't be happier with that.
Oh,
Damn
I love
straight and a bitch to work. That's the energy I like.
Oh yeah, the toxicology guys that were just chomping at the bit, being like, "Damn straight, I'm going to talk to them." And like, "Where you been? You should have been here months ago." I love it. I love that energy because they were like, "We can't do anything."
But I love that it's like people lower on the totem pole of the
Yes.
work hierarchy who are like, I absolutely want to stop this guy. Whereas the upper people are like, oh, we can't. We might lose
Ooh.
money.
I know it's
Fuck
really
off.
something.
Yeah. Sweeping it under the rug when it's people's lives just feels like a thing you don't sweep under the rug.
So many lives.
Yeah.
So many.
Again, is a person like sneaking a Kit Kat at work? Sweep it under the rug, fine.
Yeah.
Are they murdering multiple people, like healthy people? Maybe not. Maybe
Yeah.
don't sweep that. But I could be wrong. Now Pat Medlin, I believe
Hmm.
that's how you said it. She said that she outright said Cullen killed people. Good for her. List maker extraordinaire,
Yes.
wrote. Um, the fact that he was listed as on 40 out of the 67 deaths is horrifying. Kudos to Pat, but shame on you, St. Luke's.
Yeah.
What? I mean, shame on so many of these hospitals, damn near all of them. Uh, I will never understand the concept of like, I mean, I get that they're like, well, we'll lose money and we can't have that because then no one's going to come here and all of these things. And it's like, yeah, but shouldn't you be like, it's not worth it? And the money
Of
that those
course.
administrators were making, I can't even begin to think. And
Oh,
how many of them have retired and just went about their lives and just didn't care? I,
well, that's the thing I love about Mary Lund. That's why I had to put that little bit at the end where it was like, oh, I love that she was again being commended by the CEO of the hospital and then gets a promotion.
oh yeah, don't
I was
worry.
like, of course, the woman who literally lied to police
Yeah. Oh, I
flat
haven't
out.
forgotten her. The very last note I wrote was "fuck you, Mary." That's
Seriously.
that's where I'm at.
Oh,
Stop and look at the thumb. May we all take a moment to just observe the joy that's happening around us. Look at
yeah.
the little things.
Look at that thumb.
Yeah, look,
It was also the tone. It was like, hey, look at that thumb.
which is very bringing it back to speed. Sandra Bullock, it's gum,
It was,
gum.
that's what I said at the time. I was like, there's gum on my seat. Gum.
That's which again, starring Alan Ruck.
Thank you very
Starring
much. It all comes back.
it does. It does. Um, St. Luke's willing to let a killer go is insane. Money over human life is gross and not a world that I like us living in.
No.
Hospital administrators fucking with a case is horrifying to me.
Yeah.
Those fucking pencil pushing a-holes. Pencil pushing a-holes. That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Caring more. It's just the idea of caring more about money than human life. I, I I'm just speechless. Um, fired over a resume discrepancy is delicious.
I know.
And I wish I could have been the person who looked at the resume and went, hold a second, that doesn't seem right.
Yep.
Um, like my question, which I think I wrote for later, you said he dropped out of high school, right?
Yes.
And then he ended up going to nursing school.
Yes.
Did I miss the in between?
It was never explained. There was multiple sources all said he dropped out of high school and joined the Navy. There
Yeah.
was one that said he graduated from high school, but I couldn't get any sort of clarity about that. There was more sources saying that he had dropped out. Here's what I will say. He was
Yeah.
in his final year. He was in his senior year. So I don't know if there's something where it's like, is there maybe he just had to get a certain amount of credits? Like maybe he was able to
Sure.
make it up. I don't know.
Oh, he could have done like a GED, or he could have
Yeah.
done like get the whatever classes you needed to pass and whatever. It
Yeah.
just was such a weird, like, is that also a discrepancy in his history where he lied about graduating high school and they went, good enough?
Totally could be. Would
Just
that shock me? Not in the least.
no, not
Absolutely.
at this point, not at all.
No.
You said looking for patterns, and I want you to know that that gets me hot and races my heart because I love nothing more than patterns.
Yeah,
I want to make a list of all the patterns that I find. Like that's
of
where I'm at.
course.
That's my level. Him saying I want to go down fighting is would normally be an inspirational quote, but it's absolutely horrifying coming from a killer.
Chilling.
And then to turn around and give such a quick confession
Yeah,
for a guy that's like, I'm gonna go down fighting. Uh, Scratch that. It's a lot of work. I did it. Like that just feels wild to me. Him saying he wanted to end suffering as he saw it. Was a single person you killed suffering? Even if they were.
yeah.
Was it something they asked for, which is a whole other thing? But again, it wasn't your choice to make, man. Wasn't your choice to make.
100%.
I will have nightmares about drugs in IV bags
Yep.
till the day I die.
Yep.
I will think about it. Um, Anytime I'm anywhere near a hospital, I'll just be like, how can you tell?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Never could.
just
Mm-hmm.
horrifying. Over a 16-year career confesses to like 30 to 40,
Yeah.
which is wild. The idea that he had no remorse. Also horrifying. The fact that experts believe could be 400 or more people is wild. And part of me is like, do you think he kept a list somewhere?
It's a great question. I don't, it's a great question because how would he necessarily even know where those IV bags were going?
True. So maybe he just liked the idea that he knows he was responsible, but doesn't know the exact.
I
Uh,
think so.
you said this is where I sing, and I couldn't have been happier. I like seeing you jazzed.
Thank you.
I just do. Oh God, and then I just wrote stuff about his childhood, his parents dying when he was young. I mean, obviously at different points. So many suicide attempts.
Yeah. And I'm curious about that because I'm curious if that information is coming from him or if that information is coming from medical records. Obviously, there was no way for me to figure
Sure.
that out. Um, Either way, you know, I think it's also like, look, I also want to say, because I should have said this before, but like when I was questioning his mental health, that's not to say that like people don't have depression, either bouts of depression or chronic depression. Um, I'm certain that this is a line of work, especially nurses that are specifically working in intensive care, critical care. These are high stress jobs. I'm sure that this takes a mental toll like none other. I'm not suggesting that you should be penalized or unable to get a job because you've struggled with depression or potentially had a suicide attempt. That's not what I was implying. For me, it was that there was such an overwhelming long pattern that was so documented. All of his psych stays were documented. And to me,
Yeah.
it's like, doesn't that feel like it's something to be alarmed about? Because conversely, while humans are not machines, we're not impenetrable. Of course, people are going to have I'm sure struggles in those potential departments when doing that work. Also, there's a lot of people who are built for that work, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
part of the job. And yes, they may go through those times, of course, as we all do. Obviously to differing extents, but again, to me, it's just like that would be something that would be a big deal. Like, for example, showing up at the home of a coworker in the middle of the night and breaking in. That to me,
Yeah.
the fact that that wasn't the thing that was stopping him from getting jobs.
Yeah. Even if he had done it to like someone not working with him, that would be enough to me to be like, oh, that's not the kind of person you want around. But then when it's a coworker he was harassing, it's like, that's absolutely not the person you want in your business.
And again, it's like, but we're applying logic to the illogical because this is also someone who many hospitals knew was pretty much certainly killing. And they were like, oh, well. So again, we're applying logic to something that is, you know, that was not being treated in that manner.
Of course. Um, oh, now I just want it to be known, although I assume people assume, I would never pass any sort of test to be on a submarine.
Same.
I, to this day, still have nightmares about the submarine at the West Ed Mall, and
Yep.
that was 30 years ago.
Yep.
Over 30 years ago. No, uh, can't go back. Um, prank calling funeral homes. What's that about? What
What does that even
giggles and
entail?
joy do you even get? Yeah, like, what do you, is it like classic lame, like, is your refrigerator running? Better catch it. Like, is it that bullshit? Or like, is it, I'm looking for a Seymour Butts? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know.
how do you even do that? I don't, I have a lot of questions, but I'm also
Putting
like,
lighter fluid in people's drinks as a bit is also wild.
yeah, oh, it's, I mean, he wanted to see what he was going to get away with,
Mm-hmm.
and he just wanted to push the envelope all the time. And apparently that meant prank calling a funeral home,
Yeah.
which, like, were you setting up fake funerals and then not showing up and then
Great
thinking it's
question.
hilarious? Like, I have so many questions. Why funeral homes specifically? Prank, like, if you're gonna, I mean, don't prank call, but if you're gonna prank call, why funeral homes?
It feels like he has an obsession with death, which could lead to the fact that
Oh,
he had so much death in his childhood. His parents, his one brother, two brothers. One of that was the one was when he was a little bit older, but yeah, I feel like he has a fascination with death. I mean, the fact that he attempted suicide at age 9 by drinking a concoction he made with his chemistry set, like this all feels like there's a pathology here um, that then that would add into. And again, this ex-wife of his is screaming it,
yeah.
going like this man is not well. Like this stuff is really troubling. And again, the abuse of their family dogs, like, you know what I mean? Like this is all pointing like the signs are all here, folks, you know, like, and it's
Oh,
even he was
100%.
saying, I should never have been able to continue doing this work.
Yeah.
And it's
You,
interesting to me that after some of the killings, he would check himself into a psych ward. He would say, I don't want to do this work anymore. I don't want to keep doing this. Like it feels like he was grappling with what he was doing, at least at some points. But then it was like, it was because he was afforded the freedom to continue doing it that he was like, all right, well, I guess I will.
oh, it's wild to me that he was continuing to do the job and that
Yeah.
so many people just allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
And he seemed to have that attitude of like, well, if they're going to let me, I might as well.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe it's time to stand down, sir. If they're going to keep hiring you, maybe just stop applying. Although,
Well,
what
and
would he
that's,
have become, a bartender putting shit in people's drinks?
of course, this is
Like,
the
he would
thing,
have
right?
found
Is that
some way.
it's all felt well and fine for him to blame them for continuing to give him jobs. He was the person who continued to do it. He didn't have to continue killing. He did. So it also doesn't hold any water. It's just to me the fact that he was even like, I should have been stopped is the big thing.
Yeah.
Like I think he probably wanted to be stopped. There was probably a
Oh,
part of
sure.
him.
That's why he kept going to
Yeah.
psychiatric facilities, hoping that they'd be like, what's wrong? And he'd be like, I can't stop killing. And they'd be
Yeah.
like, there it is. Is it because of
Yeah.
the deaths? And he's like, it is, but I caused them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck Saint Barnabas for being the first ones to be like, ooh, he looks like this is negative. Just go on, you scamp.
Yep.
Instead of being like, oh, this is serious. Like, I like hospitals just in general to take things more seriously as far as, you know, medical staff killing patients.
Yeah. That feels like it should be high on the priority list. I think that that's again
Yeah.
like I did enjoy that um the gentleman who wrote the book, I'm blanking on his name, Charles, it doesn't matter. Um the gentleman who wrote the book, Charles Graydon, I think it was. His point is very valid that it's like this is the true scandal of all of this is less about the killer. Like that's a tragedy. The scandal is the system. It's
Oh, yeah.
wild.
Oh, it's insane. Again, this whole, you know, drug vending machine situation where they're like, I mean, we could have, you should just have something automatic set up where it's like, alert somebody or something where it's like, this person has like declined or like so many things, and that's
Yes.
weird. So maybe look into it. And also, nobody's counting, like doing any sort of like inventory on the drugs.
That's interesting to me too. They
Like,
didn't get into that, but I was like, that feels off.
yeah. Yeah. Look, the point is, so many hospitals are at fault here.
Countless. Yeah.
So
Well,
many
listen, sorry, excuse me,
hospitals and
10.
administrators.
Well, it may not be 10 because some of them did fire him immediately. Like there was a couple of those
Sure.
places where they were like, no. But yeah, there was a large amount of them. Yeah.
I do like the quote, countless. 10.
10.
I like that a lot.
We have a list. Yeah.
Yeah. I also like your idea, power case, but for like professions like police or medical staff or something where you can easily look at their history and see the actual history and maybe the reasons that they were let go, and none of this
Yeah.
bullshit like, we'll give you a nice review if you leave now.
Yeah.
None of that nonsense. Um, you mentioned Lehigh County, and I couldn't have been more excited because Lehigh County, of course, is in Pennsylvania. And so if I'm gonna, and it's not my fault, folks, she brought it up, and that is what led me there. A shout out to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, who are the development team for my precious Philadelphia Flyers, aka they're my boys, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And
Mm-hmm.
in they have also become my boys because when our season was cut short, still not ready to talk about it. When that was cut short, I did watch the playoffs that Lehigh was in, so that did extend my season a little longer. So that was a beautiful thing. Also, we're sitting at like 90 days. I mean, exactly 94 from today, but neither here nor there, until puck drops, and I'm ready.
Bless.
Chomping at the bit. I'm sick of watching birds, and it's been a day. I, just,
I get it. I get it.
I don't want the weather. I just want the sport. So this asshat saying he wants to atone for his sins by donating a kidney. Sir, those two things don't just cross each other off. I
No.
mean, kudos to you for saving a life. Um, but that doesn't even come close to atoning for what you've done. Doesn't even
No.
come
And
close.
it's so performative, right? Like it
Oh, yeah.
feels very like you have to let me save this man. Like, give me a break. You could have saved 400 lives
Right?
potentially. Like, give me, yeah, that
Yeah.
was such a,
Oh,
that was another detail that I understand it's kind of like superfluous to the story, but I thought it was important to include because it's like, that's a wild turn for this to take when he was still in, it wasn't like it was like he was 30 years into his prison sentence or something. It was
right.
happening at this time where he had, you know, the ability to have the bargaining chip of like, well, if you don't let me do it, I'm not going to help you anymore. Like, what?
Oh, yeah. It's ridiculous to be like, you're absolutely going to let me do this
Yeah.
because that's what I say,
Yeah.
because I have to do it for the greater good. And
Yeah.
it's like, uh huh, you fucking hero.
Yeah,
Bullshit.
exactly.
Um, Again, these hospital administrators should have been held responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I wrote that multiple times throughout this because I just will never get past the idea because I just can't fathom ever doing it myself, which is why I can't fathom another human doing it. The idea of putting money uh, over human life. And then finally, my last note, which I've already read to everybody, fuck you, Mary. And I absolutely stand by that.
I love that.
Um,
I also need to just quickly say I was
yes.
saying Amy Lauren, which I realized must be Laughrin. No one said it in the documentary. It's
Oh, sure.
Loughren. That's Laughrin. I think that's Laughrin, but I was saying Lauren, which I realized made it sound like it was my own name, which was weird.
Sure.
Anyway,
It is the tough thing when they don't say it. Like
yeah,
I will often Google such an like whatever name and pronounce and hope for the best. But you get a lot of like AI sounding things that you're like, that doesn't, no, I can't,
I know.
I'm not understanding it. There is, I believe, a Spanish gentleman that has like YouTube videos where he pronounces names, but his accent is so thick that I'm like, am I saying it correctly? Or am I saying it just correctly for your accent? I don't even know. But yeah, it's tough. I did Google last night in bed a name of a character I was reading in a book because I was not convinced I was saying it right. Um, the internet said I was not saying it right.
Well,
But I was like, oh, the character dies like early in the books. Like we're talking about her funeral, like in on page one. So I'm like, it's fine. You don't have to remember this name, but she keeps getting talked about. And I'm like, for fuck's sake, stop it, because I don't know how to say that name. I heard multiple different versions, is my point. And I'm still not sure what I'm settling on. Do I read the name, but like my eyes jump over it and my brain goes, meh, and I just keep saying her when I'm reading? I do.
yeah,
I
I
do.
get
And
that.
there's just the book has so many people that I'm like, why are we? What are we doing? I'm confusing myself. Again, I already said overwhelmed is my constant state that I'm in.
I get that.
Ah, Lauren motherfucking Ash. Thank you for your research. What a ride. We do not deserve you. Thank you for educating while entertaining.
It's an honor.
And thank you, dear people, for joining us on this journey and allowing me to drive the bus, whether I should be driving or not. Not the point. As always, we appreciate your support. If you haven't already, make sure you give us a follow on our socials at True Crime and Cocktails on Instagram and Facebook, and on Twitter. It is Twitter at Not Detectives. And if by some chance you enjoy videos of a middle aged woman unboxing toys to appease her inner child, you can find me on Instagram at Unsolved Christy. 7-Eleven contacted me. I died. I died on the spot. And if you don't like unboxing videos, maybe you want videos featuring your favorite chucklehead aunties. Maybe that's more up your alley. If so, head over to patreon.com/, true crime and cocktails. There are episodes of pure chucklehead banter, episodes with bits of true crime, a poll for episodes on this show, a newsletter about upcoming episodes, a monthly live with these two dingalings in the virtual flesh. What happens on those lives? Oh my God. The best way I can describe it, beautiful chaos.
Absolutely.
So, Lauren, would you like to tell the people about next week's episode?
I'd love to. On the next True Crime and Cocktails, no one saw a thing.
That's right. It's the episode you thought you were getting today, but
Yep.
instead you got how was it described? A delectable treat.
There it is.
Um, Instead, which I mean, I know I enjoyed, so I hope you all enjoyed as well. Um, Lauren, would you like to say goodnight to the people?
Good night. Look at that thumb.
I'm going classic. Good night, Dave Grohl.
Beautiful.